got a theme running through these, running through all the readings, starting, of course, with the Psalms. And before I start, we need to discuss terminology, vocabulary, whatever. The word that appears in the Psalms and also in the reading from Ecclesiastes is the word vanity. Now, we all know what vanity means to us. It is a person who is vain. It is a person who takes upon himself or herself and makes themselves seem more important, right? We all know the song. You're so vain, you probably think the song is about you, right? But that's not the way it was used in the days of the King James Bible. We still have vestiges of this word in modern English. If somebody does something in vain, it means, of course, that they do it and it doesn't do any good for them. And that's what vanity meant in the old days. Somehow or another, where the noun changed, right? The other word snuck through, probably because people didn't use it very much. But when the Psalms talk about vanity, and particularly Ecclesiastes talks about vanity, he's talking about things that are of no use. And what appears to be of no use? All the things that we think are important. You know, many people have been taught that it's a good thing to be rich and to get lots of possessions, unless, of course, you're like a hoarder. But but it's continued. As you had an opulence, it made you look as though you were successful, that you'd done things right, you'd done things well. And some people even believed that made it look as though you were favored by God. And we're not the only things to think that. Back in the days of Ecclesiastes, and the date of the book, when the book was written, is a little vague. I mean, probably somewhere around 2nd or the 1st century BC. So it's late. It's a late edition. And in fact, it was one of the handful of books that really they had to fight to put into the Old Testament. When they were creating the canon, there were a handful of books that were considered on the edge because they didn't say exactly what it was that people thought that were important to be included in a historical, a legal, and a religious text. The other one, of course, is the Song of Songs. But those were the two books that had some difficulty. And why? Because all the things that people thought were good are frankly trashed. Ecclesiastes says, I was taught that this is something that I should do, so I did it. And describes in great detail all the things that he did. Now, some scholars believe, and traditionally it was believed, that the book of Ecclesiastes was written by King Solomon. And the reason is because King Solomon was incredibly wealthy. And there are also those references to wisdom in there. Now, further along in the book, that's developed a little bit more. But right now, they're talking about material things. And all of those things that are important and are supposed to be important to all of us. And also, that it's a really good thing to work hard. Now, this is not to denigrate work. I mean, let's be real. If you think about what Jesus says in the Gospel from Matthew, those people who give up everything and follow me, they are assured of going to heaven. But if you gave up everything, who's going to grow the crops? You know, who's going to make sure that the buses run? You know, and if the society would collapse. So he can't possibly have meant this. But I think what Jesus is talking about, those people who achieve things just for the sake of achieving them, are not the ones that are going to go to heaven. But for those who recognize all things come from God, as the prayer says, and to God all things will return. And when you think about it also, when you're talking about in the book of Ecclesiastes, one of his biggest concerns is, who's going to follow me? I got all this stuff, but then what happens to it? You know, I cannot be sure that just because I have done all these things, which I think are good, hey, he employed a lot of people, that all these things that are good will be taken over by the person who is following me, whether it be his sons or someone else. And if you look at this, the whole concept is not just that it is a bad thing to be rich. It's not necessarily a bad thing to be rich. It's just that if you devote yourself to material things, and you devote yourself to things that are not, and you neglect the spiritual side, well, clearly you're not going to go to heaven. Jesus does say that there is a place in heaven for wealthy people. I mean, after all, I believe that Matthew was probably pretty well off as a tax collector. He probably made a pretty good, a pretty good living. One of the reasons, perhaps, why he was hated. Zacharias, another one, probably had a pretty good, made a good living and did well. Now, do you think that just simply because they were wealthy, that they were not going to go to heaven? Clearly, that's not what the gospel is saying. The gospel is saying that you have to have things in order, and you have to have priorities. And of these things that you have priorities, the spiritual ones should be first. And those who are first, Jesus says, by which he means those who are first in society, and those who are first in affluence, and those who are first in becomes, are not necessarily those who will be first in heaven. And those who are last, the ones who make less money but are spiritually devoted, those are the ones who are more likely to go to heaven. And to return to Ecclesiastes, what he's saying here is, don't just look at the things that everybody thinks are important when you make your decision of how to live your life. Analyze them, look at them, and put them within your life, always remembering that God should come first. And other parts of Ecclesiastes, he talks about things that everyone knows are, they're important. Not only important, but they're just sort of common knowledge, right? The race, he says, we were taught, the race is always to the swift and the battle to the strong. But Ecclesiastes says, no, that's not true. It isn't always the case. He says that sometimes those who are not swift and those who are not strong will prevail. However, I would like to point something out. Not everyone agreed with this. Back in the 1920s, there was a writer named Damon Runyon. Runyon is remembered, if at all, for a series of short stories that he wrote about certain people in New York City. which was later made into a musical and a movie called Guys and Dolls. And Runyon was a very successful sports writer and horse racing man. And he said, "The race may not always be to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, but that's the way to bet." And I bring you these words in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
Amen.